Topic number 1. How far do we go to stomp out racism? Taking down
Mm.
statues, renaming buildings, removing holidays.
You got a
When
lot of
is
that.
enough or too much too much?
It's interesting, that one, actually, because it's actually become a big issue in Britain recently, because there's a group of people have decided, Nelson's column in London is very famous. It's a big giant column in London with a statue of Nelson on it. And there's a group of people have said that that's exactly what we're talking about. They think it represents a time of imperialism and bad news, and should they take it down? But then he did do a great naval victory, which meant the country wouldn't be the country if he hadn't done what he did. So it's a complicated thing. I think the trouble is that you want to preserve history, but you don't want to promote bad stuff, which is what can happen if we're not careful. Maybe it's the answer is all these things should be in museums. Maybe they shouldn't be in public display. If they're all in museums, they're just history, aren't they? They're history and they're in their place, and it's not an issue. They can't be seen as emotive. But I like the other bit. How far back do we go? Because I remember arguing with an Irish friend of mine who wanted reparation for Southern Ireland and whatever happened during the Troubles over there. But I said, well, does that mean the Irish are going to compensate the Scottish for when they used to raid their tin mines 100 years before? So I think, in a sense, I can see what they mean, but I don't know. It's a difficult one to say. For example, if we take away all these things, all these statues and stuff, what are you going to put in their place? They are monuments. They are amazing works of art as well. So I don't know. It's a difficult one. I think maybe, there's not many people gathering around Nelson's column like Charlottesville in the States and demanding we all become Nelsonites. So in some ways it's fine, but maybe we could have a time limit, anything that's causing problems from the years. And I suppose if the heroes are found to be flawed, but the trouble is, most heroes, certainly the men, they're all flawed. Yeah, Samuel Pepys, the great diarist of London, seen as one of the greatest in the world for ages in the world, the greatest diarist, turned out was a total git to women and basically was a pervert who subjected them to all kinds of stuff. But again, like I always say, I always want to be a bit wary of judging past by our standards. What people did in the Middle Ages, we just couldn't imagine what they used to do for entertainment. Stoning people, hung, drawn and quartered, with special instruments to make sure people didn't die too soon. And this was public entertainment and crowd control. But would we be fair to go back in time and say to someone who's in the Middle Ages, you can't do that, that's horrendous?
But
I don't know, it's a tricky one, really tricky one.
I'm just thinking, maybe it's also more of an issue how the consciousness of a country regarding its history is anyways. Because for Austria, we're basically in general, Austrians have this idea that everything started 100 years ago, and then there was the Second World War, and then in 1945 there was our zero, so everything started all anew.
See, that's
different compared to when you say, oh, you have a 300, 400 or older history, which we don't have that sense in Austria, even though Austria is a very old country and we definitely could have it if we would have a different way to cope with or to handle our history.
I suppose that's the point, isn't it? Because, for example, nobody wants to talk about the Second World War and Nazis because of all the horrible things they did. But then horrible things have been done all over. What the colonists did in the States to the indigenous people is horrendous. But, do we I mean, maybe we should stop celebrating these things. Maybe it's that simple. Maybe if somebody's famous because they're a warlord or they won some battle, they should just be recorded in history as having won the battle. They're famous at the time, and when they die, put them to rest. I mean, look at a modern example of a hero, Winston Churchill. You'd be hard pressed to find anybody who would say a bad thing of Winston Churchill. Yet history records that in order to prevent the Nazis finding out they'd broken the Enigma code, he let them bomb Coventry, which was further up away from the coast than most of the cities that were hit. They bombed Coventry, Liverpool and Glasgow and killed hundreds of civilians whose defences against air raids were limited because they didn't expect to have them. I mean, Coventry was like Dresden. They literally flattened it and killed hundreds because that was the tactical decision that Churchill made. Now, the morality of that is another thing. But the point is, should we celebrate someone? We could all acknowledge what they did. So we say, right, that was what you did. You were a good leader. We understand.
Yeah.
But what we shouldn't do is celebrate them. That's the difference. So maybe we should make statues to people who achieve things without killing people. You know, that might be better. It just seems like you need to have some kind of balance. It's very difficult because, I mean, it's not a modern thing, is it, really? It is all older things. You very rarely see anybody erecting. I mean, they tried to erect a statue of Maggie Thatcher, for example, in Britain for years.
Yeah, that's true. Normally only people who are like long dead get a statue.
Exactly.
Like, I don't know how many statues Empress Elizabeth has. Probably a few. But like she was murdered in 1898. So that's a while ago.
But it's safe then, isn't it? If someone says, can we put a statue up? Someone's going to say yes, because there's no real problem. But if someone wants to put a statue up, say if you wanted to put a statue of Barack Obama, for example, loads of people would be for that. But a lot of people in America wouldn't be. They would say it was a bad thing because it would be either one, because it would be Obama, but two, they might worry that somebody wants to make a statue of Donald Trump. So that is the case. It does.
And also, yeah, he's still a living person, and normally living persons don't get a statue. At least in our culture in West Africa.
Then you come to the second point. Where's the moral code? I mean, nobody thinks fascists should have statues. They've all been taken down. The dictators. One of the things dictators do. And that's the other thing, though, the other flip side of it. Most dictators, built from the Egyptians onward, build statues of themselves and markers to themselves because they understand these things have social impact. So anything we build has social. So maybe we should be a lot more careful about the things we do, and maybe we should take Nelson off his pedestal and stick him in a museum. It might be time to do that. Maybe we should just put art on top of these things, you know, something representative.
Yeah, I would agree. Shayester, Robbie, what do you think about that?
Anything, Shayester? Go ahead.
No, not really. I'm just listening.
A lot of statues in Iran. Do you still have a lot of we have. But do you do modern statues? Do you have modern heroes stuck on pedestals and things?
I didn't really get what you said. Sorry, could you repeat?
Do you have statues the way we do? I know you don't have religious ones, but do you have statues of someone like elite generals who won battles and that sort of thing? Do you build statues in squares?
Yeah, we do, but like most of them are statues of our famous poets and like literary figures and figures like that.
That's a good thing because in Austria we don't have any statues from any poet or any.
Oh, it's very strange. Austria's got these great artists and musicians and world-class people. You guys don't even have a statue of Mozart anywhere, which is a bit weird.
Like, we don't even have, like, I don't know how many squares in Austria are named after Mozart. I have no idea, like in Salzburg and Vienna, everywhere. But like a statue? No.
That's interesting, though. We've then got the other added on to the question: do we count street names as this kind of thing? So, say we decide to take all the statues down.
The
Do we
reason why getting into that, let me go here. The reason why I thought of this particular question was about 2 weeks ago. I heard something on the news here that there's a famous building in Boston called Faneuil Hall, and some people were upset and wanted the name changed. He put money to buy this building, and then they put his name on it. And I guess
Well,
back then he made his money with slave trading, and they
oh, dear.
want the name of the building changed.
Okay.
So that's why I went through this particular question.
But it's an interesting one because it's difficult because you've got the reality of people. People are not perfect. Like I always say, soup kitchens were invented by Al Capone. The first working man's car came from Adolf Hitler. So
Yeah, that's true. And he called it the people's car, so yeah.
So the bad things are done by good people. So what do you do? Do we make it that, how far do you take it? Do you think, oh, this guy was a slave trader, that's not good? You find that recently we found some diaries that suggest Albert Einstein said some pretty racist things. Again, maybe racist by our viewpoint in his diaries. So does that mean we can no longer celebrate Einstein's theories and his achievement on cosmology because he wasn't perfect? So maybe that's the problem. It's not the people. It's what we're attaching to them's the issue. Nobody's perfect is a good analogy for anything. I mean, that's where you get idolatism from, and where you get people granting people too much power and it corrupting them. So rather than take down the statues, maybe we should try and change our attitude to them and say, look, we're celebrating this person for the good things they did, but they are people. You're not going to find anybody who's completely flawless. So if you celebrate people's achievements, that's fine. If you find out later that, someone wasn't perfect, that isn't why you bought a statue. You built a statue. So maybe you just put on the statue, we are building this statue of this person because of this act. We do not condone every single thing this person ever did in their life. Because otherwise you've got this thing of, we need to celebrate the positive people achieve. But I say, you're going to find a perfect person. The person who was rich enough to help poor people and fight slavery had to be wealthy enough to probably own slaves. I mean, some of the men writing the Constitution about freedom for all owned slaves because that was how you survived in those days. Because remember, there was no machines. If you just threw out all your slaves tomorrow, you would literally have to pick your own crop, dig your own ditches,
Yeah, it was just a different time back then because not everyone I think not everyone who we consider like human today was truly considered human back then.
Yeah, well, when they freed a lot of slaves in the South of America during the Civil War in the South, they just said, right, you're free, we don't own you, we don't whip you anymore. A lot of the slaves just stayed on the plantation because they didn't know what else to do. And ironically enough, a lot of the production was unaffected by what happened because they just went back to work. So, it's like saying to someone, you're free. This person only knows one way of life. They've lived their whole life in one place. They aren't educated. Where exactly were they going to go? Half of them would starve in the streets. So there's always got to be a balance. I think a good analogy is the balance is like Donald Trump's latest thing. He keeps putting tariffs on everything, like to China and to the countries, because he thinks America can make steel.
Yeah, we will see what happens. Like,
You still there, Russ?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
yes.
Yeah, but the interesting thing there is so anyway, you can build steel and stuff, but what about small things, small machines, small bits that are made in China, processes? Now in America and Europe, these companies don't exist because they weren't commercially viable. It was cheaper to go to China, so nobody's going to set up a widget factory in Glasgow if they're competing with the whole of China, so they rely on China. So what you have to do is if you take one thing and block it like that, you have to first invest in the small things in order to balance it out. So it's the same. I mean, I think that's the key to it. We need to make sure we celebrate people, but be clear what we're celebrating them for. Don't just say we think this guy's amazing because, he cured cancer or something, and you find out he's a paedophile. So you have to be careful. We have to basically say, okay, we'll do that. We'll celebrate people's achievements, not their flaws. Because I don't know anyone some people are worse than others, but you're not going to find any of us who are saints.
Right. Yeah.
And, and also if people are imperfect, that can be a good thing because people can relate to them. Most people have their heroes, but if your hero is a human, then you've got a chance to emulate what they do. If your hero is some kind of superhuman, then you're never going to be able to do what they do. So it's not motivation. We're a bit obsessed with hierarchies and stuff. I mean, bear in mind, a lot of statues are also a class thing because they cost a lot of money. So someone with a lot of money or a group of people with money have to contribute to make these things happen. And it took, years. We've only got 1 or 2 statues of suffragettes in London. And yet, that whole movement started there. What's this?
The two pictures of a billboard, very big one, I shared right now. The whole talk reminded me of this one. The first billboard was installed before the game, before the yesterday match of Iran, and it was like all men. There were so many protests against it and stuff like that. And the second one is the new one, which they changed it yesterday, and there are women there as well. So I think that's good.
That's another thing as well. We do think about that because advertisements for World Cup teams and stuff, it's a similar kind of thing. But yeah, we should celebrate everything. But it's good that people don't put up with stuff now. That is a sign of change all over the world, which is a good thing recently. A lot of things people would just shrug and say, oh, well, nothing you can do, and let it go by. But these days, people don't let anything go by. Anything anyone does that's bad, someone stands up and says, you can't do this. Now, whether they stop it completely or not, it's still a good thing. It's still a good thing that we now live in that kind of zeitgeist now where ever since the Me Too and Time's Up and the revolutions in Iran and people, okay, you've still got Trump and people like that doing bad things, but nobody's complacent now. Nobody's just thinking there's nothing anyone can do. People aren't prepared to put up with it. And it's seeping into everything. Because I suppose you see, if that poster went up for the last World Cup, nobody would have done anything. This time round, people were standing up and saying, no, it can't be all men all the time. You've got to acknowledge everyone. So it's a good thing. So again, these statues, these street names, these building names, they're kind of indicators as well of where we're going. So if someone starts calling a building or a statue over something good that someone did, it's interesting. We've got a plaque that says this is where the Great Fire of London started. We don't have any plaques that said the Great Fire of London also killed the plague and probably saved more lives than it took. So maybe we should put something like that there because everyone sees the fire is always bad. So the things are never quite that straightforward. I mean, the World Cup is another example, actually, because the world and Russia were really at each other's throats, weren't they? Wasn't looking good. Everybody was shouting at Putin, and everybody was fed up with the way the Russians were behaving. And now it's calmed down a bit because everybody's sent their football teams over there, and now people are focusing on the sport. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. I definitely think that when we talk about like removing statues and so on, I think we should like, I know it's not really a thing in America. In America, streets have like, the naming of streets has a different system, but at least for Europe, we have to include streets as well. Because like, we have streets named after musicians and artists and other people. And you know, when you name streets after people in the war, I'm always a bit wary about that because, like, there's always, for me, that doesn't really feel right.
Yeah. This war is a difficult thing, isn't it? Because even though people, like I was saying, people do what they have to do, but we shouldn't really celebrate that people kill people. So, yeah.
I've never seen one single, like, monument or anything in Austria for the First World War.
No, that's
Not a
interesting,
statue,
actually,
not
isn't
a,
it? Yeah.
like, I know there are streets named after, like,
Quite
generals
curious.
in the First World War, but there's never a statue where it's like,
That's curious, isn't it? Because the Second World War you can understand with the Nazis and all that, but the First World War was kind of
there are like memorials, like
yeah, because
in the village where I grew up, there are like memorials of all the people who died in the world.
yeah,
And
that's
like,
definitely.
it's like a list where it says like in 1918 this and this person from this and this pharma died there, like in Russia or
Yeah,
something.
that's definitely, yeah, but it's curious though,
But
isn't it?
there's
Because
never a monument about like First World War as a whole, which
yeah, which is
for
it's
Austria had
curious.
a huge impact.
Well, it's curious as well because even though the First World War, unlike the Second War, I mean, they blamed Germany for the First World War, but the First World War was everybody's fault. All the main powers contributed to that equally, I think. They all guilty of doing the wrong thing. Whereas the Second World War, you can understand because that was a rise of fascism and, we could see the
Yeah,
bad guys.
that was
It's
definitely the
interesting
Nazis.
yes, it's interesting that the First World War isn't seen as much. I mean, I think there's a kind of a international, almost a worldwide guilt over the First World War because it was called the war to end all wars, and they did say that when this was over, people would never have another one. It seems ridiculous to us now because we seem to have a war every 20 minutes. But back then, people really believed it. I mean, there was a period just after the First World War where there literally wasn't any wars. It was, it lasted a few years and it was like incredible. I mean, it was the technological development in the 20s and 30s. I mean, the early 30s, pretty much what we call the modern world, machines the way we live now, was invented then. That was like a golden age almost. And now we went back to war. The Second World War never really worked as well. We just kept on going really. So yeah, I suppose maybe there should be no monuments to war. Maybe it should just be done. You just, like I said, record history and move on.
There are kind of like memorials in Austria for like people who have been deported to concentration camps.
Yes, well that's
Like you would go through the streets and like they're called tumblestones. They're like in the pavement, like on the sidewalk, and so you literally tumble across them. Like you wouldn't, like they're very small and it says like the name when the person was born, and then everything that you know, like if you know where they have been deported to, then the plaque says that. When they have been killed as exact as possible and stuff like that. I
Maybe
can
that's
show you
true.
one if you want.
Yeah, maybe that's.
But apart from that,
I think that's too much, really. That's what I'm saying. I think there's kind of a fixation. Maybe we should record in history and put it back. They say that if
no,
you
I
don't,
think that's a
say
good
if you
thing
don't,
because it shows that
yeah,
that
no,
normal people from all ages and literally people from across the streets were killed by the Nazis, and not like people over there 100 kilometers away. No, that's a good thing.
no. The thing
But
is, I don't know though, because I think it should be recorded, obviously, for history. But I think there can be too much focus on it. They
well,
say that
it's
if you
not
don't,
really much focus on because it's not very prominent. So it's not like it's a huge monument where you're like, oh, it's there. It's very subtle.
yeah, I think it's interesting
And
because it's kind of,
also, there are no, probably some streets are still named after Nazis. Probably.
then I think what's interesting is that I think we can do a bit too much on that because they say if you don't read history, you're doomed to repeat it. But then if you program yourself with previous behavior patterns, you behave that way again. Do you see they've done an AI now that this is clever enough in a set way to predict people's behavior? So this way we can watching people do the same task in different way over and over and over again. It can actually start predicting what certain people are going to do. So maybe we should be a bit careful with what we surround ourselves with. Maybe we surrounded ourselves with more, if we, for example, when we have Armistice Day, we should always have the day they say that this is when the war started. We should only celebrate when the war ends. And maybe we should let it go. Maybe we shouldn't do it every year. Maybe we should just let it go. Put it in history. Don't forget it happened. But don't relive it all the time. Don't reinforce it.
Well,
We
that's
did.
the thing we never do. Austria never celebrates anything historical in any sense,
Well, it's quite a
apart
good.
from May 1st. Like, May 1st is a state holiday, and so is October 26th and May 15th. But
So
those are the only non-religious holidays we have in Austria.
which is interesting because maybe we shouldn't do these sorts of things. I just think that it's interesting, but maybe the whole thing with the statues and everything else, we're kind of reinforcing these things. For example, a lot of people think, historians think, that the Second World War was a direct result of how poorly Germany was treated after the first one. If people had let go a bit
Yeah, but
quicker.
that makes sense because Germany
Yeah,
was shrunk to
yeah,
1/7 of its
that's not my
size
point. I
before
know,
World
I
War.
understand. I understand why they did it. I'm not saying I don't get that. I get what they did, why they did it. I'm just saying maybe we shouldn't have done it because maybe if people would let go of things, then we'd get a bit
Yeah,
further.
I understand that because that's
Don't
what Hitler
flip.
basically said. They were, yeah, because everyone was like, oh God, we're so small, and yeah.
So there's a lot of the stuff like that. I don't know. It just seems that maybe we could let go of some things. I think we hang on to things too much now. I think
I think statues per se are good, but you have to really, if you
value.
erect a statue, then then you recognize something of history, and you're commemorating it, and you have to be really careful what you're commemorating.
Well, I think it's very powerful, and maybe it'd be better not to say anything than say the wrong thing. So maybe we could just either put clearly what
Like,
people are
if
commemorating for.
people erect a statue of someone who has liberated their country, like from colonialism or so, then I think that's a good thing.
I
But
don't. Those people killed a lot of people. Revolution. Remember, one man's
yeah, but
revolutionary.
still the country was free afterwards, and
Yeah,
yeah,
but
I
what
know what you mean, but
And I don't know what that means. People say that all the time. We talk, especially in the West, we're obsessed with the word freedom. What does that actually mean? It means that you can get up in the morning and go to work. I mean, it's like a lot of people die for that word and without really knowing what it means. We're free. We're not controlled by this country. We're free to control ourselves. But the people who run your country are just another group of people. There's no magic formula because we fell foul of that with Brexit. One of the big arguments for Brexit was sovereignty. And three of the people who are pushing hardest for that, one of them moved his company to Dublin, one of them's applying for German citizenship, and one's applying for French citizenship. So basically it's an illusion, I think. I don't know. I think if you get free, it should be at the time, should be celebrated because it's a thing that saves people from oppression. But I don't think we should deify people. I mean, Che Guevara's, every student in the world's got a T-shirt or a poster on his wall. He was an effective guerrilla fighter, but by no means would he not be called a terrorist these days. All guerrilla fighters are by definition terrorists because they have to hit a bigger army by damaging its supply lines and, small dangerous attacks. But that inevitably kills more people, innocent people, collateral, than a battle on a battlefield. So the morality of it is difficult. So I think that history should be recorded, but maybe that's where we should leave it. We should spend more time, like you said, celebrating poets or statues to people who made great songs, or, the man who found the right stuff to kill a pest that means that we get enough food to eat, stuff like that.
Yeah, it would make sense, and not like there has been controversy since basically forever what to do with the house where Hitler was born in.
Yeah, that's a tricky one,
should
isn't
we
it?
tear that down or not or whatever?
I think that's the other side of the coin. You can empower. Remember, there's still a lot of people think Hitler's great. So maybe by simply leaving the house as a house, it's just a house, bear in mind. I don't believe in ghosts. It's just a house where someone grew up. Had the world gone a different...
Also the other thing was, until very recently, it was in private hands and nobody could do anything about it. Yeah. But yeah, they were kind of worried that, like, depending on what they would do, that neo-Nazis would see it as like a cult, place, and like,
it's almost
go there as in, yeah. So that was kind of a concern. I have no idea what they want to do with it now.
They could turn it into a Jewish health centre or something, or a centre for, turn it into a clinic for people or something like that. Change its personality, make it into something that it isn't. Make it
the exact opposite.
They did with the only
Amnesty International could have offices there. Something like that.
Yeah, that's kind of what they did with the only concentration camp that was ever built in Austria. Because now disabled people are working there. Like, there's a cafe and they're like serving people.
That's good.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing, because then it's like you're not denying the history of the place, but you're like saying, no, we're valuing the people, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, something like that. Maybe we should think of more monuments like art and things that are useful and turn them into useful things. But I do think we have to change our thinking on this, because we have got a habit of celebrating violence. We see more value in people giving and taking lives than we do anything else. We celebrate more soldiers than we do doctors.
Yeah, that's true.
We celebrate more warriors than we do peacemakers. So maybe we need to start moving away from that, the glory of it. I mean, the difficulty is for governments is that wars are difficult because you've got to get people being prepared to give their life to something. It isn't a big enough object. You're going to get... I mean, each war we've had in the UK, there have been successively less people volunteering to do it. In the First World War, they couldn't stop people volunteering. By the end of the First World War, they were having to ask for them. In the Second World War, they basically had to conscript almost off the bat. So there is a kind of tendency for people obviously not wanting to fight wars, which, and the people who want wars fought galvanized people by a lot of flag waving and all of that. So it is interesting. It is an interesting one. But I think we do that. I think would be the solution for me would be simply we make these monuments into people's achievements that are positive, where we have the existing ones, we don't tear them down. We simply modify them to have some kind of plaque explaining that we only celebrate this person for the good act they did, not for any subsequent horrors they were involved in.
Yeah, but we also have to be like, okay, the person did good things, but we also have to like point out the bad things, because otherwise we're having this this duality again, which is like, oh, there are saints and monsters, and there is nothing in between, which is not how it is.
I mean, bear in mind as well, we do it now. I mean, we think some of the great mathematicians of our time, like Aristotle and people like that, are lauded for stuff. But it now turns out that Aristotle was a bit like Edison and actually stole a lot of people's theories and claimed them for his own. So, again, but does it really matter? We have the theory. Pythagoras was accused of the same thing. So, but does it matter? I mean, really, it's just a label now because it's so far in the past that nobody's going to really be... we're not going to offend any relatives of Pythagoras if we point this out. So maybe we
that's true.
And we should celebrate what the positives people do, but make it clear that is what we're doing. We are not saying this person was a paragon of humanity. We're simply saying this achievement deserves recognition. And we stop recognizing people for wars. People fight wars for lots of reasons, but they're basically about killing people. So maybe we need to stop making that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Any other contributions from the other players?
No, I would say I
good.
think you've pretty much covered my thoughts. Because
what about you?
No, not really.
Cool.
I had in the I didn't finish the rest of the question because it was so long, but what I said in the rest of the question was, would it possibly be better to educate people on what those people did and use those items as tools as a reminder of what not to do or how not to act, which goes along with what you were saying with celebrating them for what good things they did, and then what you were saying, having the flip side, we're not celebrating this person for such and such and so on.
Yeah, it makes it a good idea. It makes it less. I mean, I don't know, it's an old phenomenon anyway. Do you think that actually, I mean, the statues we build now tend to be in Britain statues for people like the suffragettes who weren't acknowledged in their time, but there are very few calls, as I said, for people to build statues, particularly politicians now. I don't think anybody's going to be building any statues to politicians anytime in the future because they're seen too much now as being flawed human beings rather than leaders. So I think that it may even be that this particular way of doing things is dying out anyway. Because I must admit, with all there's hundreds of statues in London, but anything beyond by the Second World War, very hard to find. I mean, even Stephen Hawking's got a plaque. He got buried in Westminster Abbey between Newton and I think it's one of the other guy, Hale, and they've got him in there. They've got this plaque with his name and his formula on it that he's famous for, and that's it. There's no likeness of him. There's no great marble thing. So when people see that, they'll know he was a famous physicist that did great things and brought physics to popularity. They won't need to know that he was married 3 times or run off with his nurse or anything like that. And that won't be the first thing they think about because they're not deifying the man, they're deifying the achievement, which was his formulas and Hawking's radiation and his black hole theories. So it seems to be going that way anyway, certainly for modern things. Winding back, I think you're right. We just need to update the plaques and just put stuff on there that says what we're doing it for. Taking them down is a little bit. Because taking them down would cost a lot. I mean, moving Nelson would cost a fortune. Whereas putting a plaque at the bottom of the pillar would be relatively cheap as well. And it's like, it touches on to reparation, which is another area I'm not keen on. This, should we apologise for things that happened hundreds of years ago? Should we give money to people for things that happened hundreds of years ago? But I always think no, because the people it was done to aren't alive now. That money would be better spent making sure it's not happening to people now than looking for the past and all of that.
I would agree. I always think, like, the thing that has happened in the past, are people still, like, disadvantaged of it because of it now? You know what I mean? It's like, things can happen really long ago, but, like, in general, like, if nothing happened the last
Nothing's
300
changed.
years,
Right.
if nothing changed, then people are still at a disadvantage for things, and then I think it makes sense. But not for something where it's like it wouldn't really make much sense to ask Austria to pay reparations to countries because because Austria was like involved in the Crusades.
It's
That
interesting.
doesn't make much sense because so much time has passed and things have changed. But
It's a kind of a modern thing. Like, well, Albert Einstein spent most of his working time, certainly his youth, he lived in Austria, even though he was German. He didn't like Germany much. He went back there twice and left it soon after. Even though he was German, he spent all his time in Austria. Hitler was Austrian, spent all his time in Germany. But it's interesting, Einstein is not much celebrated in Austria, even though he did most of his groundbreaking work was done when he was in Austria and universities there.
That's true. Like he spent a lot of time in Vienna.
He did, yeah. It's where he wrote his theories. His theories were written there.
I have no idea why.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is interesting.
I have no idea why.
No, I don't know either, but it's curious. It's a curious thing. I mean, the Germans don't particularly take credit from either, which I find quite odd. You don't see a lot of. You don't see, like, America. He spent a lot of time in America when he became famous, and so people associate him with Harvard and America, and and the quantum mechanics and these discussions with Niels Bohr. But they don't really mention the fact that all of his, what we would call his groundbreaking work, was actually done when he was in Austria. So it's interesting.
Where was Niels Bohr from again?
Bohr, I think he was Dutch. Yeah, so he came from in Europe. So. But it's interesting. It's just interesting, actually, that we do that. But again, I think it is a tool, isn't it? That's the thing. We have to shift how we do these monuments and recognise people and not allow unscrupulous forces to, use these symbols. And it does seem to be, I'd say the world is definitely heading that way. There's a lot less of it. One of the good things of the internet, I think, there's so much information now that people seem to cluster around things and information rather than symbols as much. Because symbols were shorthand for when you didn't have time or energy or resources to get all the information. But now most people can get the information at the touch of a button. You don't really need them. So that's quite curious. I mean, look at football. Football Used to have everybody had an emblem on their shirt that was their country. Now you can't see it for the advertising, and few people pay much attention to it now.